Hello and welcome to our CIONET live, not just wine tasting, but networking event. The closest thing you can get to our super networking dinners that we were hosting up until COVID-19. We've hosted a good number of these now, and with regards to not just wine tasting, we do wellness, we do all sorts of wonderful things, but it very much is about the wonderful content, the knowledge share, and it not being just another Zoom or call or a Microsoft Teams meet. So before I hand over to Roger, the slide that you should see in front of you if you're on speaker view, and please do be on speaker view from now until we have our networking sessions, because that will cover me, Roger, our wine expert Adrian, but also our wonderful hosts from AWS. And as you can see on the slide in front of you, there's just a couple of house rules that we do beforehand, purely because there are some familiar faces to us. And if you can have your video on, that would be absolutely superb. It's not necessary at this time, but just throughout the networking, so everybody can be familiar who else is in the network. So if you could, and our team would be able to help you with that if need be, but rename yourself with first name and company like I have in my screen. Question-wise, much like a round table, there'll be opportunity to ask questions throughout. If you have a pressing question or one that you want us to maybe ask of our speaker or of other people in the audience, or even Adrian himself once he arrives and kicks off the wine tasting experience, please feel free to put it into the chat with any feedback or anything like that. It's as open as possible. We do like to say that it is under complete Chatham House rules, like our dinner. But for those that have applied to join, not been able to join us for this evening, we are going to record so they can see, what they've missed, and then there's the opportunity to share and with them afterwards. Again, you can keep it in speaker mode for the time being, but when we're in the formal the Q&A session, you can put it on gallery mode, which then you'll be able to see absolutely everyone taking part in the event. So without further ado, I'll hand across to Roger, who many of you know, some of you don't, but Roger's our research director and COO of CIONET UK, a thoroughly nice gentleman, as a lot of people agree. But without further ado, here is Roger.
Thank you very much, Sean, and a really warm welcome to everyone this evening. A particular thanks to AWS, our sponsors. And as you will all be well aware, we're going to talk about cloud tonight. And that really does take me back some 10 years or so when I first started talking about cloud, and people cynically said, "Oh, isn't that timeshare?" For those of us who are old enough to remember timeshare, but the answer is no, it isn't. It's a very big shift in the whole nature of the IT services sector, as big as anything that we've seen probably in any other sector. I believe cloud is the big disruptor, and it's got some organizations on the back burner and others definitely on the front burner. And of course, AWS, I would certainly say, is working at the front, leading the charge. And doing, excuse me, I think we've got some background noise, but doing an absolutely terrific job. So tonight we are really keen to welcome Jonathan Lake, who is the SAP manager of AWS and looks after a lot of the major clients who operate very large ERP systems on the cloud. And I know that Jonathan is going to talk to us firstly about the opportunities and challenges that cloud presents. And then it's your turn to really share what you're doing on the cloud. And I think it'll be very interesting to see where each of you is on the cloud journey, if you're just at the start, or indeed even if you're at the end of your cloud journey. But as someone said last night on CNBC, a top analyst, the current cloud penetration is about 5% of the total opportunity available. We are absolutely in the early throes of cloud. We're by no means where we will be in 5-10 years time. There will be a tremendous ramp up, and of course the growth of AWS, Azure, and other major operators has been absolutely phenomenal so far, and it will continue to be so. But I think it's also worth saying that as the cloud sector matures, the nature of what we will expect from the cloud will change as well. It's no longer just a commodity. It's no longer just about buying computing and processing power. It's a lot more than that. But anyway, I'm going to sit back and wait for Adrian to talk about something even more important. And that's the champagne that awaits us prior to Jonathan talking about cloud. So welcome, Adrian. And if you could just give us a little introduction.
Thank you, Roger. Good evening, everyone. My name is Adrian. I run a company called Wine Unearthed. We've been running wine tastings in the real world for 15 years and online for the last 4 months. So we're going to start off this evening with a very good English sparkling wine from Night Timber. So hopefully, if everyone has it to hand, if you haven't already opened it, we'll open it together. If you have already opened it, then you may well have had a cheeky glass before this call started.
Good.
So, whenever you open a bottle of sparkling wine, for those who are going to do it with me, always keep your thumb on top of the label and keep the cage on, keep the metal bit on, okay? Most people fiddle around with it and it can be quite dangerous. So leave your thumb on, twist the bottle, not the cork, and hopefully it shouldn't sound like you've just won the Formula One Grand Prix. So has everyone got a glass of the wine, a sparkling wine poured? So,
do turn your videos on because we want to see you all toast us with your champagnes.
So cheers, everybody.
Cheers. Yes.
So anyone has any burning questions about wine as we go throughout the evening, then please do ask. But this is Night Timber. So this is made in Sussex from the same grapes as champagne, in the same way as champagne, just in England. The English can lay claim to inventing champagne, not the French. So Christopher Merritt back in the 16th century came across sparkling wine production rather than Dom Perignon. So we invented sparkling wine and have the terroir, have the climate, have the soil to make very, very good sparkling wine. So whenever you look at a wine, always think about how it looks, how it smells, and how it tastes. So this wine, when you have a good sparkling wine, you want to have lots and lots of small persistent bubbles. What you don't want is to have bubbles on the first glass and then for it to go flat by the end of the bottle. So something like a Night Timber, which is a premium English sparkling wine, should stay fizzy from first pour to the last glass. What about on the nose? So whenever you taste the wine, think about how it smells. So I'm sure most people are familiar with champagne and sparkling wine. So this wine, for me, is very reminiscent of champagne. So lots of toasted bread, brioche, nuts, quite yeasty, quite rich, quite soft. Compared to, say, a Prosecco, which is made in a different way, which is much lighter, much flowery, much sweeter. So this wine, very, very similar to a champagne. So made from the same grapes. So Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Pinot Meunier, the three main grapes that go into champagne, and the three grapes that go into most English sparkling wine. The reason why English sparkling wine is very good, and English sparkling wine producers will say better than champagne. Champenoise producers will shake their heads in disgust and say no, no, no. But the reason why is the terroir. Terroir doesn't have a literal translation in English, but basically means a wine is a sense of place. This particular grape variety, grown in this particular soil, with this amount of sunshine, can taste subtly very different from one just around the corner. So the climate in the south of England is very similar to Champagne. Champagne is not baking hot, but it's nicely warm. South of England, in a good year, has lots of sunshine. The soil type is very similar. If you look at the White Cliffs of Dover, you can see chalky limestone running right through the south of England. That limestone runs right through northern France, through Burgundy and Champagne, which means Chardonnay, which likes limestone, is one of the key grapes. Okay, so English sparkling wine has a lot more in common with Champagne than most other sparkling wines. What about on the palate? So how does this wine taste and feel to people on the call? Mark, you look like you're enjoying it then?
It's really good. It's really good. I tell you what, I've enjoyed. I like the you get that sort of citrusy zing to it, which is really nice, really pleasant. But I think, and this is lovely and cold, so and that's probably how I prefer my sparkling wines.
So
but
with,
yeah,
with
really
Champagne,
lovely.
with Prosecco, with Cava, with English sparkling wine, it's the one light wine you can drink straight from the fridge or from an ice bucket. So most people will drink a white wine straight from the fridge, but 5 or 6 degrees is too cold for white wine, but it's perfect for sparkling wine. It gets the bubbles going, it's light, it's refreshing, and something like Night Timber, puts you in a good mood. Hopefully puts you in a good mood for the rest of this, for this talk, for this meeting. Champagne, English sparkling wine is a sign of celebration. There's something to look forward to, there's something to be happy about.
What about glass, Adrian, for this? Because you quite often see sparkling wines in a flute or a coupe or whatever. What's your view on that? Or does it not really matter?
It does matter. So it's personal preference in terms of what you have. So if you went around the screen, I'm sure lots of people have got lots of different glasses. So the glass that I have here is probably slightly fatter than a flute, Mark, and that's normally what you'd call a vintage champagne glass. So if you drink bigger styles of champagne or sparkling wine, or if you have older styles of sparkling wine, then it'll be something which is a cross between a white wine glass and a flute. If you drink non-vintage champagne all the time, then a flute which channels the bubbles up to your nose is what you want. The coupe is good for a dinner party. It looks really nice, but it's not really good for the bubbles. So you've got that really, really wide rim at the top, so the bubbles just dissipate and they go. So it looks really nice.
Or for your champagne fountains that we're all accustomed to.
Yeah, I mean, it's much more difficult to build a champagne fountain out of these glasses than it is out of a coupe. So I wouldn't recommend that, especially if you had a glass beforehand, Mark. How many people on the call have had English sparkling wine before?
I have. I've tried it.
Yeah, I've tried it, but it's not.
So how do you find this one, Simon?
Yeah, I mean, this one's far superior. I mean, like you said, it's got the same almost like bubbles as champagne. It's much more refined, whereas before it was quite sharp.
Yes,
I found.
Yeah, I mean, in the early days of English sparkling wine, it was like glorified apple juice. It was sparkling apple juice. It was quite sharp. It was quite appley. And you'll still find inexpensive champagnes or inexpensive sparkling wines can be like that. Night Timber is a premium producer. The only issue with English sparkling wine, if it's an issue, is price. It's not that much cheaper than champagne, if at all. Night Timber is more expensive than lots of champagnes out there. Cost of land and the cost of labour in the south of England means that we're never going to have cheap mass market wines. But what we should do is reflect where it comes from and have some interesting wines that, if you have some foreign guests, some foreign clients come over, or if you're going to visit them in the future when you're allowed to, take them a good bottle of English sparkling wine and they'll be surprised. I did a tasting for a group of Italian and French people the other day, and they were intrigued by English sparkling wine, but they'd never heard of it, so they were going to seek it out. So it's something, I think, for the whole English wine industry. They'll pin their tail on sparkling wine and hopefully sell some white wine and rosé off the back of it. English red wine, if you have 15 or 20 pounds to spend, then I wouldn't buy English red wine. Okay, so until global warming kicks in, I'd hedge my bet somewhere else. We need consistently more sunshine. Okay, so sparkling wine, yes. White wine, yes. Rosé, sometimes. Red wine, maybe not. So there are plenty of other places you can buy. Unless you have a penchant for really acidic, thin, and tart red wines, then south of England is the best place to be. But if you don't, if you like lots of fruit, if you like lots of body, then maybe look for somewhere with more sunshine, which is a little bit richer.
Thank you very much, Adrian. So a very good start and sets the theme. So now, Jonathan, if we can hand over to you for a discussion on cloud and the journey to cloud. You're muted. That's fine.
Okay. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, so yeah, Jonathan Lake, and I'm responsible for the SAP business in AWS. Hopefully we can get into a discussion about various topics this evening. So I guess I was just going to start by just sort of almost raising the point, what typically are the business drivers for migrating to the cloud, and particularly in my role from an SAP point of view, that's a particularly topical area. Typically, that consists of customers who are deploying a brand new SAP S4 transformation, so performing a digital transformation of some sort. So that's a new deployment. It can also be about cost reduction, so that can be, of course, a driver. But also, a lot of our customers are going through a situation where, the data center or the infrastructure needs a refresh, and that can be another reason. But also, customers are often looking at the need to improve agility, improve flexibility within their deployment as well. And agility and speed certainly is an important aspect to this, as indeed is the improvement in security and resilience and so on. What I would say is that originally our customers, probably back in 2006 and slightly after, it was typically about workloads within AWS, and the process was all about how do we consume our services on demand and align to our business. And what's changed now is that cloud is driving the innovation agenda, and that is probably the biggest change. So 70% of my conversations that I'm having now are really about how do we extend business processes beyond SAP, actually, to talk about areas around IoT, machine learning, data lakes. How can we improve efficiencies through DevOps? How can we extend business processes so that we're using apps and APIs and so on? So cloud is not just about now workload and cost savings. Typically, those are important topics, certainly, but they're also about how we can, the risk management side of things is a really important side of it. But also, it's often about driving the innovation agenda, and that covers so many aspects actually around. It can be around supply chain, it can be around efficiency of the back office aspects, it can be around how we can help retailers for demand-driven AI and so on. So there's so many rich areas that we're engaged in now. So it's completely changed the dynamic, I would say. And so there's some really big opportunities, and we're obviously working with now a large number of customers. So it started out public cloud, people were concerned about risk, particularly SAP. SAP obviously is a business critical system. Customers don't give that up easily, and so the SAP world was quite slow to adopt cloud, partly as well because SAP is such a monolithic application. It's certainly true to say that in America, I think that the adoption has been much faster. In Europe, I think it's fair to say that that cloud adoption for SAP has certainly been slower, and certainly I would say we're getting to around about a third of the SAP estate now has moved to the cloud, and there's about 2/3 of customers are yet to move into the public cloud. So there's still quite a wave of engagement, but that wave is happening. And what is preventing that really? What is holding us back? I think, you know, a lot of the conversations we're having are about how we can help our customers with the operating model. So the operating model is really important. You know, how do we set up the governance? What is the right way to operate in the cloud? Because it's really important that all of those things are set up and our clients set up for success. You know, we're very much within AWS, we're here to help our customers, guide them and help them in their cloud journey. Governance is one important aspect. Setting that security foundation is another part of it. Setting up all of the sort of cloud economics and those sort of things, so that framework is in place, is another aspect. But also, I would say, you know, not just looking at the operating model itself, but also looking at the innovative areas as well that can be provided, that can be delivered in the cloud. And sometimes for a lot of our customers, it's about starting, you know, starting with sometimes a small project early and trialing a proof of concept. You know, some of our customers are quite nervous about putting that toe in the water, and in some cases we're actually delivering those proof of concept type programs. So it really depends on what the use case is. Yeah. But what I would say is, you know, start by working through what is it you're trying to achieve. So work backwards from the requirements, and typically what we would do is to say, you know, what are you trying to achieve as a business? What's the outcome that you're looking for? And then we work through the operating model, laying the foundation for success of the cloud, and laying that foundation, understanding what you're trying to achieve and what the objectives are, and working from there. What I would say as well is that certainly in the UK business, about 30% of the SAP community are on public cloud today. There's about 70% of customers are either in a private cloud or in their own data center. There's also that shift towards SAP S4 as part of the program. There's about 20% of the SAP install base is actually on SAP S4. So there's also a huge wave of engagement going on, certainly to look at SAP S4 as part of that. That wave is yet to happen, partly down to SAP because they've extended the maintenance to 2027. So a lot of customers are actually keeping on their same SAP system. A big reason for that is that SAP ECC6 is actually, for a lot of our customers, is quite good, and it delivers everything that our clients need. So for that reason, a lot of our customers, certainly during the course of this year, and perhaps that's down to the pandemic partly, I would say, but a lot of our customers now, about 2/3 of them this year, are actually looking to do a migration onto AWS rather than a transformation. And as I say, that really goes back to you know what the business priorities are. One thing I would say is that as part of that process, it's really important to look at other areas as well of innovation. So when we're looking at SAP, yes, absolutely. Looking at workloads, one of the big areas that we're working on at the moment is the topic of data lakes. So we're doing literally dozens, actually, of proof of concept type activities where we're ingesting SAP and non-SAP data into a data lake and getting real relevant business insight into a client's requirements. A lot of that is driven by, you know, working backwards from understanding you know, what the business requirements are in terms of reporting and insight, and typically that varies from industry to industry, but we are working with our customers to develop specific use cases according to the industry, according to the industry need. Certainly within AWS, generally the engagement starts with an assessment and a discovery workshop. So we would typically work through what the priorities are, what the operating model needs to be, what the cloud governance setup needs to be, and what the business case needs to be. We would then carry out that TCO assessment, and then once we've done that assessment, often that consists then of some sort of pilot migration or proof of concept. We would then carry out that proof of concept according to those requirements. And as part of that phase, we would often work through, you know, what are the migration and modernization requirements there. And what are the things that are preventing that? Often, I think it's, you know, it's often a case that customers have a skills gap, and certainly within AWS, that is a big topic that we're finding that needs to be addressed. That can be plugged partly by service providers and working with those service providers, and in some cases, actually, AWS are absolutely here to help in terms of that. So that was all I was going to say. Hopefully that's given you a bit of an insight into some of the activities that we're performing. What I would say within AWS is that you know, this is quite a huge wave that's going on at the moment, and so we're incredibly busy, and I look forward to working with you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. And I think it's now time for the delegates to have their say. I'm actually looking firstly at Simon Newby from BAE Systems. I guess you are, I'm sure, a big SAP user. Are you a big cloud user? And where does...
Yeah, well, obviously we provide cloud services for multiple clients. Obviously, some is in the public domain. So, for instance, we provide to the US Defense. But we also consume those cloud services ourselves in terms of, like you said, very much, I would describe it as an infancy stage, consuming some of those cloud services now. And obviously in BAE, you've got basically air, land and sea from a defense perspective. So as well as being split across certain geographies, like North America's one particular division of BAE, and each of those has different flavors and blending of cloud services, some less developed than others. Some provide very advanced for its customers in terms of around security, obviously through applied intelligence, some of the learnings we've taken across that. But yes, you know, certainly from our perspective, we're looking to develop more services on there as different clients have requirements. And I think, as you're aware, certain cloud services are now approved to have information stored for them. We deal with a lot of government contracts, both UK and abroad. So obviously now that there's more trust in the cloud services, we're looking to work with cloud providers certainly to develop that market a bit more.
So that's very interesting what you've just said, Simon. So in a sense, cloud has opened up a lot of opportunity to expand your own services to customers. So much an external facilitation, but to what extent really has it penetrated into BAE? Has it made a big difference yet? Do you think it would make a big difference the way you operate internally?
I think, I mean, if you have a look at certainly, I mean, you know, and I won't talk about specifics because obviously it's more difficult, but I mean, if you have a look at, for instance, Rolls-Royce and their use of autonomous ship manufacturing, you are seeing much greater use of cloud services. I think as more autonomous comes into it, and remember we're talking about, you know, class 5 fighter jets as an example, you know, you're needing to certainly have that processing capability from a manufacturing perspective, and being able to coordinate that across multiple countries and suppliers. If you think about the Eurofighter or the F-35 as an example, I work predominantly in the aerospace market. So certainly what we're seeing is baby steps in some areas due to security concerns, as well as the difficulty that you have with aspects of that. But I think it's in its infancy in a lot of areas. I mean, we talk about predictive maintenance. It's very, very difficult to do without having those cloud services available, as an example.
Thank you very much. So perhaps we just move to a completely different sector. Mark, Santander, I'd be really interested to know how cloud is affecting banking. Is it core to banking these days, or is it still a relatively embryonic?
I would say, compared to some of the other banks I'm aware of, we're still in the early stages. We've done a few lift and shifts of some of the data stack onto the cloud. We're now almost sort of changing the policy as we start to do our digital transformation for a number of different business lines, that we're actually looking to make cloud the first choice, and actually on-prem is almost a secondary choice. We have issues, as probably with most global organizations, in terms of data sovereignty still. So depending on where customer data is actually housed, quite often at the moment it's in country or in head office. So that's something we're also having to address. But I would say at the moment we are on the early steps of a hybrid journey. I think our aim probably in the next 5 to 10 years would be to move the vast majority of the infrastructure over to the cloud, as part of more of a modernization and transformational program, as opposed to purely just lifting and shifting an existing infrastructure to a cloud-based solution. I think whether or not one of the decisions we're sort of still trying to finalize, and the interesting thing that other people are actually doing, is whether or not they're going to look at cloud agnostic solutions, or whether they're almost going to go full hog with one of the 2 or 3 major suppliers. Because obviously, as you start to leverage their technology and almost go in bed with one of the major 2 or 3 solutions, it's going to be very difficult to reverse engineer that back out if you're sort of constrained to actually leveraging their technology. So, I mean, there's solutions such as, in terms of the data stack, such as Snowflake, which you can obviously fail cross public cloud site. But I think at the moment we're probably looking at using solutions such as this, but also probably moving more into one particular provider going forward. So I think we're on the early steps, and it's very interesting to see what other organisations are doing. Obviously, the risk and security aspect in terms of the whole financial side, working with a very regulated market. It's only really the last couple of years that most of the major regulatory bodies are happy with the massive adoption of the cloud services. So I think financial services with some of the major organisations are a little bit slower than, let's say, some of the challenger banks, and certainly obviously most of the technology companies.
Thank you very much, Mark. Just one question. I guess, are you associated with the UK bank, or have you an international role?
So I work in the IB side, investment banking side. So I actually sort of work across, most of our clients are global clients, and so we're delivering global solutions. But obviously we also fall under UK regulatory requirements. So where necessary, we have UK-based projects, which we have to adhere to. But also we're delivering global-based solutions both over here and in other aspects, North America, South America, and Europe.
Thank you very much, Mark. And perhaps now I'm going to turn to the legal profession. I notice there's a number of legal CIOs here tonight. Mark from HFW, has cloud entered sort of serious adoption yet in the legal profession, or is it still embryonic?
It's a bit of a mixed bag. I'm looking at Richard on the call, so I know BCLP will have a view on this. But for us at HFW, it's a new discussion, and it was on a sort of a roadmap that, had we had this conversation 6 months ago, I would have said it was probably 3 years away.
Wow.
And now it's been accelerated, so we are very much on that journey now and trying to determine. So it's interesting to hear Jonathan talk there about how AWS are supporting people to migrate and understand how they've got, how they have to have the right governance in place. And certainly for us, we are mapping out data at present, and that's very much about understanding with a global footprint where our data is, what that means with regulation and legislation. How do I ensure that I'm meeting client needs? And we, very much, I think we have to understand that bit first, so that when we go to the cloud, we get that right. But one of the things I've always talked about since being appointed in role is I want the technology to enable our people, regardless of where they are on our geography, and we are a global law firm, so I have a footprint across every continent, is that they have the same rendering of the information or the same experience as they would regardless of where they are. And that very much leads us into that, well, I have to be cloud-based to be able to do that effectively. And I think also one of the models I want to adopt is to become the consumer of a service. So very much moving away from me owning my data center and owning and buying tin and paying for the cabling and all, just give that to someone else. Give it to an AWS, give it to an Azure, give it to whoever. Let them worry about it. And I just consume the service and hold them to account for an SLA. And that then, that changes how I budget for what I'm providing, and it changes the way that we view the sort of the topology of our network. And actually, we stop worrying about that stuff. And I think certainly in the legal sector, in my limited time, having just celebrated my first year in role, is they would historically think about wanting to own all the tin that gave people their connection. And that's the mindset shift that we're going through. And thankfully, I've used the pandemic, I've used the change in the way we're working as the accelerator to push that forward on the agenda and to get the management board to buy into me asking for that extra investment that says, look, we're going to have to accelerate into this. Let's do it now while we've got the opportunity. And I know AWS and Microsoft will be doing this, is helping people go on that journey. It's supporting me on that and actually funding some of the work that needs to be done to get you on that. And that's been really helpful, because I'm also aware with my team with 55 strong across the firm in IT, I don't have all the answers. I don't have all the knowledge. And actually, why should I need it when AWS will come to us and they've got a raft of people who've already thought about this for us. They already know the difference between hosting cloud in Australasia versus Asia versus Middle East versus Europe. So that's the thing I think has been wonderful for us is being able to extract that knowledge and draw that from the experts who've done it for many other people, which means I can accelerate my program far quicker than if I was to try to do it all in-house.
Thank you very much, Mark. I'm actually itching to hear from some other legal firms, but first, I think, Adrian, you're back on the spotlight with the second wine. So if I can just interrupt the flow for a few minutes, Adrian, back to you. You're on mute at the moment. You're on mute, Adrian. Mute, unmute.
Sorry. I said we'll try to lubricate the conversation as we go along with the second wine. So we're gonna have the Gavi de Gavi. So pour yourself a glass of the white wine if you haven't done so already. So Gavi de Gavi, so good that they said it twice, is from Piemonte in northwest Italy. So Gavi is the place, and the grape variety in Gavi is a grape called Cortese. That's the one, Roger. So lots of people will have drunk lots of Gavi in their life and not known or cared what the grape variety is. So all the famous wines of Italy, of France, of Spain are named after where they're from and not necessarily the grape that they're made from. So most people on this call and outside will know a Chardonnay, will know Sauvignon Blanc, will know Shiraz, will know Malbec. The grapes behind the famous wines, you know, are less known. The World of Wine book that you hopefully all have will give you all that information. So after this call, if you're curious, it'll send you off to sleep in no time at all. There's lots of information in there about grape varieties, about regions. But Gavi and Gavi de Gavi is Italy's premium dry white wine. So likened to Chablis in style, if you're out for an Italian meal and you're unsure what to have, it won't be the cheapest, but it'll be a very good choice if you're having white fish, if you're having grilled vegetables, if you're having an antipasti or a light starter. So how does it look in the glass? So in terms of color, you know, quite lemony to me, pale straw at most. So quite pale, quite light. On the nose, one thing you'll notice with old world wines, wines from northern Italy, wines from northern France, they tend to be quite subtle. So subtle and elegant and refined if you're being kind, or I can't smell too much if you're not. So very different from new world wines, which are much more in your face, much fruitier. Cortese, Gavi de Gavi, is much more subtle. So for me, sort of citrus, something perfume, some violets, something quite light, something quite fresh. And on the palate, so how does this wine taste? So rather than me tell you how it tastes, how do you think it tastes? So how does it feel to you? Roger, how do you find it?
Very nice, actually, but I'm no wine expert, so I'm going to rely on others for their expert opinions.
You don't need to be a wine expert. The good thing about wine tasting is that there's no right or wrong. So unless you tell me this is red, anything you say is valid. Everyone's palate, everyone's nose works differently. So what one person on the call likes, someone else might dislike, and there's no right or wrong. It comes down to personal preference. So with a Gavi de Gavi, for me, on the palate, quite light, quite smooth, has good minerality. So I said it's likened to Chablis. So it's not about how much it tastes, but it's about how it feels in the mouth. So it should be quite soft, quite smooth, quite rounded. It's a wine which relies on its elegance and its subtlety rather than knocking you over the head with lots and lots of bright, fresh fruit. So if you had some Doversol, if you had some grilled vegetables, you know, this would go really well. It wouldn't overpower the food. But likewise, you wouldn't choose to serve this with some really spicy Asian food because you wouldn't taste your wine when you had it. If you like stronger wines, the New Zealand Sauvignon Blancs, etc., much more fruit, much more powerful. If you like Asian foods, they go much better. Likewise, if you don't particularly like your partner's cooking, then buy some New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. You won't taste their food. Everyone's happy. It's a win-win situation. With this wine is best served with classic food. There's something quite plain, something quite simple, something quite light and fresh. So I said Cortese is the grape variety. I said this wine is Gavi di Gavi. So it comes from the heartland of the region in Piemonte. So I said so good they said it twice, but Gavi di Gavi is better than plain old Gavi. It comes from the better vineyards. It comes from older vines. And with wine, when you make wine, with this wine and with the red that we're about to have later on, the older a vine gets, the better the fruit gets. The deeper down its roots go, the less grapes they produce, but the better the quality of that fruit is. So if you buy a wine in a shop or you see in a restaurant and you see the wine being described as being old vine, or in French, vieille vine, or in Spain, vinas viejas, they're suggesting quality. So it may be a bit more expensive, but it should be a very good example of its type.
Thank you very much, Adrian.
Excellent. And Roger, if I can just quickly interject, and sorry, I should have highlighted this earlier, and hopefully I don't get fired in the morning. We do vote, much like our network dinners that we would have had, on the most valuable participant at the end of each event, and it also helps us with feedback on content, on flow, and obviously we are a very customer-centric network that values your opinion. So we will be asking you for your feedback and vote us on the most valuable participant, where there is a substantial charitable donation to the winner. But yeah, I just wanted to highlight that before we went back into the conversation. So sorry about that, Roger.
Thank you very much, Sean. So Richard from BCLP, another major law firm. How are you responding to cloud? Is this again early stage, or are you well on the journey?
Yeah, not dissimilar to Mark at all, really. And we, BCLP, formed from two predecessor organizations, BLP, predominantly UK-based, and Brian Cave, who are predominantly US-based. And we merged just over 2 years ago, about 2.5 years ago now. And neither firm had a particular cloud-first strategy, and neither had really dabbled too greatly in cloud. And so we've spent the last couple of years integrating the firm's systems to become one firm. And we've had opportunities to consider cloud, and I'm in the knowledge management space, so I'm director of knowledge management. And one of the key integration, or two of the key integration projects I've been leading, is the document management systems integration and our finance systems integration. And we've had every opportunity to consider cloud in both of those key projects. And in each case, the firm has decided not to pursue cloud for those projects. I think, given what's happened in the last 6 months, and for many of the same reasons as Mark, that will change. I'm sure over the next 2 to 3 years, when we come to the next renewal cycle, whether that's to do with the kinds of key firm systems or whether it's to do with the data center contracts, we will begin to shift. There's no doubt in my mind that we'll do that, but it's in legal in general, I think that there'll be very tentative steps towards cloud. We do have we do have various services that are delivered through cloud, but the key and core firm systems, we're still very much on-premise, and I think we will stay that way for 18 months, 2 years before we start to venture in any serious way towards cloud.
I think that's a very interesting challenge for you, Jonathan. I can see you sitting waiting in the wings there to pounce, but I mean that does echo well with what I've heard from a lot of law firms: some conservatism, some reluctance, and yet there is, as you say, the whole not sharing of knowledge across a highly distributed company, I'm sure gives cloud a real opportunity for the future. I'm particularly interested in this whole aspect of how to leverage knowledge assets in any professional services firm, and particularly the use of AI and machine learning here. I don't know where you are on that front.
Roger, I was going to say one quick question. I think a few other companies may have actually done the same because of COVID-19. We were very much in the migration from an end user compute onto the cloud, and certainly in the space of 2 to 4 weeks, we went from probably about 1,000 or 2,000 of our IT team in the UK to migrated to full 20,000 concurrent licenses on a Azure end user stack. Teams and the whole of their office sort of environment ramped up massively the infrastructure. So in some ways, COVID-19 was a fast track for end user compute, which I think some people would obviously see as being very beneficial in terms of purely being able to scale from 2 to 20,000 seats in a space of a few weeks. It's something you'd actually have. I don't think you'd be able to do it on an on-prem based solution, where obviously just to ramp up with Microsoft there was obviously very easy. So I think there has been some advantages, and obviously I think that's moved ahead probably 1 or 2 years where we were moving towards, but it's certainly been very beneficial. But some of the crown jewels, let's say some of our trading plant and some of our sort of CRM based systems at the moment we're still looking at, but certainly end user compute is something that's been very easy to move over. It's probably a similar sort of thing with most of the other people on the call here, that they may have had a similar experience over the last 6 months.
Thank you very much, Mark. I think a lot of people regard cloud as replacing the on-premise big compute facilities, but reality, of course, says most of us are on cloud all the time. If we're sitting at home using Microsoft 365 or anything else, you're on cloud, and so I think cloud is creeping up on us from all directions. Or if you're using SaaS services, CRM, Workday and others, you're on cloud. And so I think there's a pincer movement going on here. I'm interested just to turn this one to Mark Reed of Ferndale, because you're in the hospitality industry. I know your hotels very well. They're outstanding hotels. So does cloud have any significance for the hospitality industry? COVID and obviously.
Sure. It's interesting to listen to the conversation. As a hotelier, we've obviously been decimated by COVID. You know, our occupancies are in the low teens for the hotels, and 4 remain closed. So it's we don't expect to be profitable until probably June of next year, and we don't expect to see occupancies for 2019 repeated until 2024. So it's a bit of a challenge, to say the least, at the moment. We're probably about 60% cloud supported by vendors. So we'll pick a vendor, so let's say OpenTable, for example. It's a cloud-based vendor. Who they're using for that cloud really isn't important to us. It's about the application and how we use it within the business. So we tend to be driven by suppliers to the company. And if you walk into any takeaway at the moment, you'll see that there's probably about 4 or 5 different systems they have for taking orders. Well, in a hotel, typically you have around 25 different systems. So you're never going to get all of those onto one cloud solution. And we're probably not going to do that, because we're going to allow those suppliers to move to their own cloud variants. So OpenTable, until about 2 years ago, was a PC in the back office. Now it's a cloud-based solution, for example. And we've had some retreat as well. Our property management system was in the cloud, but was so unreliable due to the product not being designed as a cloud solution in the first place. We've actually had to pull away from the cloud and put it back on premise, which puts some challenges with us with GDPR, PCI, and so on and so forth. So we have some big costs there. I also feel that whatever we do, we're going to have a computer room within our property for the internet connections, for the wiring, etc., etc. So while it might be a great idea to move stuff to the cloud, put storage there, and so on and so forth, we have these areas already. We don't need to invest or move to a cloud or move to an OpEx concern. So I think where we're going to be is we're going to sweat the CapEx we put in for a couple of years, if not the longer, to make the best use of the investment while we don't have an income of note. But I'd really be interested in knowing from the people on this call, how many systems are in your environment? As a law firm, are there 3 or 4 main systems, or do you have the same challenge as me? There are 20, 25 systems. Again, Mark, probably at NHS, probably has loads of systems that will never make it to the cloud, but it would just be really interesting to get an idea. And also from AWS, how they could help us is to say, here's some stuff that we've done for your industry vertical. You know, here's a good paper on it. This is what we did for this company. This is the driver, and so on and so forth. So I'd like to see communication like that.
Thank you very much, Mark. I only wish I could take advantage of your low occupancy. Believe me, I'd love to spend a few nights in a Ferndale hotel, but my wife won't let me do that yet.
Okay, fine. Well, see you soon then, hopefully.
Exactly. Yeah, well, that's the first thing I'm going to do, believe me. Mark from NHS, I mean, how does cloud affect yourself and the whole NHS environment now? And has COVID made a difference?
Hasn't. Yes, we've got more money. We're spending more money on more IT, but it's not cloud related necessarily. Yes, you're quite right. We're using Office 365 like most people, so there is that engagement. But and it was a question I was actually going to ask Jonathan at some point in our conversation, and that was, he touched on the idea of barriers to entry being skill shortage, and I'd be interested to know on any of the initiatives that he thought were going ahead in actually getting people more have greater understanding of the cloud technologies and what they can do with them. There is an element of fear factor. NHS are, by their very nature, quite cautious. So if we can allay those fears by introducing more education, that's obviously a benefit. And that will help just bring down yet another barrier to cloud entry.
Back to you, Jonathan, on this whole issue of skills, because it takes a lot of people to make those big shifts into cloud, is it not? It's a big transformation.
It is. I think one of the, just a few things about the cloud, some of the benefits there. I think what it does do is that it's shifted the expertise and the knowledge back to our customers. So, you know, one of the big things that it does, it gives you a much greater level of control. And I think that's a big plus. In the past, you know, it was a lot down to the service provider. I think this gives you the opportunity, the cloud gives you the opportunity really to consume a service and to build up your own skills where that's appropriate. So it does give you that opportunity. Within AWS, obviously what we're doing is working with our customers to make sure that first of all, we give you the sort of training and expertise that's needed. So we will absolutely work with all of our customers to make sure there are training plans in place, and that's certainly a huge part of what I do and what my colleagues do. And also, so it's setting up those training plans for you, but also we've got a huge amount of online training that we're making available as well. So, you know, a lot of it is tailoring it to meet your individual needs. Absolutely, and we will help support training, and we spend a lot of time working with some of our partners as well to do that training, and we will and do offer a whole suite of online training as well that's available. So there's a lot of options available there, and also just to the point that was made earlier, absolutely, we also share a lot of best practice. So in every industry that we cover, we also share knowledge and expertise and document all of the case studies that we can. So that's a huge effort for us, so that we can compare, you know, other customers in your industry to share that knowledge and how they do things there, and share best practice as well. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Adrian Booth from Cambridge Education. I would be really interested to know how cloud is affecting you, particularly with the COVID situation and education as it is going through a transition.
So I've done cloud twice. I've been with the Cambridge Education Group now since March last year, but before that I was at PayPoint, which is a payment transaction processing company. And at PayPoint, the issue we'd got was we found it very difficult to ramp up delivery capacity. So what we basically did, we took the VMware technology stack, because we were very into VMware at the time. We moved down the route of doing software-defined networks, and we basically created a completely automated solution for creating a direct copy of our data center from network up, so that we could stand up a completely separate test environment for each individual team. And it took us about 20 minutes to create the full data center network infrastructure when we'd finished. We did it on blueprints. So once you got the network in place, you could then say, this particular system was composed of the following servers, the following services, and we'd build them up so that we could deploy our payment processing online platform on top of the network. We could do the transaction processing side on top of the network, and so on. VMware were picked for two reasons. We got a lot of work already in place with them, a lot of experience with them. The other one was that they were signing agreements with Azure and AWS. So our logic was, we do it first on-prem. We've got two big data centers with lots of capitalized kit in them. But actually, what we were expecting